Hey everyone, it's Kevin, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about fat phobia. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to speak with me, there is a link below. And if you want to start your own YouTube channel, then check out the Creative Business Academy by Latino Artists. There is also a link below. And just as a disclaimer, I do use the word fat. I know that word can be somewhat triggering, but this is English, and we all know what that means, and I'm going to use it. So if you don't like that word, you don't like that adjective, maybe you shouldn't watch this video, but that is the language that I use. Having made that disclaimer, let's proceed. So what is fat phobia? Fat phobia, if I could describe it, is at a basic level the fear of being fat. And this can lead a lot of people, especially women, although not exclusively women, and particularly younger women, to adopt restrictive dieting methods. So they, in order to not be fat, they go on a crazy diet, they deny themselves the nutrients that they need, they work out a lot, they go to extreme measures to avoid being fat. Now, a lot of fat activists or body positive people would say that's fat phobia. They're doing everything possible not to be fat because the culture tells them that they don't want to be fat, that being fat is not desirable. Fat phobia could also be ascribing negative characteristics to being fat. So for example, if you see a physician and he says all of your health problems are because you're fat or you're overweight, that could be an example of fat phobia. You can also see this in dating apps. Women and men who are overweight tend to get less attention, and this can even show up in hiring processes. So when a fat person applies for a job, he has less chance of getting the job simply because he's fat. So our culture ascribes certain characteristics to fat people, like being sloppy, being lazy, being indulgent. That sounds pretty awful. So the point of this video is to answer the question, is that justified? And is fat phobia a real thing, or is this just something that they're making up? So the point of this video is to address fat phobia. Is it real? Is it a problem? How deep does this problem go? Or is fat phobia made up? So I'm going to try to address all of that in this one video. I'll give you a hint. The answer is in between. So fat phobia. So this fear of being fat, it makes a lot of people adopt these restrictive diets. And I think that's probably one of the most pernicious effects about it. It definitely made me alter my behavior in my early 20s. Although I don't think it was necessarily fat phobia. I think for me, it was a lot of things. It was insecurity. It was isolation. It was a desire to be really fit more than it was a fear of being fat. I mean, there was no reason for me to fear being fat. I was 21. I was active. I had never been fat in my life. I mean, when I was a freshman in high school, I was kind of chubby. But other than that, it's not like I had this long history of obesity, and it's not like my family was out of shape. So for me, it wasn't that fear. It's just I wanted to be really fit, and I put this unnecessary emphasis on being fit and being lean. So for me, it was the appeal of being lean more than the fear of being fat. Now, I can't speak for everybody. I think there are a lot of people, and especially women, who think that being fat is undesirable. So they look at magazines, they look at images, they look at blogs and Instagram, and they see all of these fit people. You don't see a lot of overweight or plus size women on Instagram. Fit women definitely get a lot more attention. So if you have two thumbnails on YouTube and one of them is an overweight woman and another one is this, really fit woman in a bikini or something like that, I think I know who's going to win. Now the question is that fat phobia? Or if you watch any TV show or movie, you see women and men who are in great shape. You don't see a lot of overweight people. I mean, there was that, what was that show, King of Queens or whatever? So that guy, I guess, is an exception. So maybe it's easier for a male to be overweight than it is for a female to be overweight, because one of the greatest assets a woman has is her physical beauty. She needs that physical beauty to attract a mate and to get what she wants in life. I hate to say it, I'm not trying to be sexist, but physical beauty is something that women really want, and they want it because it can help them get what they want. So it is easier for a male to be overweight than a female to be overweight, because we expect women to be to be really fit, to be really pretty, to be beautiful. They need that physical beauty if they want to attract a long-term mate. So I know this goes beyond health and nutrition. This goes into sociology and psychology, but it's hard not to ignore that fact. I think one of the bad things about fat phobia is that it can lead people, men and women, to adopt really restrictive diets. And we know what the long-term effects of those diets are. It's always bad. It leads to eating disorders or disordered eating, probably binging, something, night eating, whatever. So it leads to the opposite result that they wanted. So where does fat phobia come from? I can identify 3 sources, and maybe even a 4th, but let's start with pop culture. You watch movies, TV shows, you don't see a lot of overweight people in those shows. Maybe a man is overweight because he can get away with it, or he's really funny, but you don't see a lot of overweight females. So maybe somebody like Megan McCarty. Okay, so she's kind of plus size. I wouldn't call her fat. But when you look at most celebrities, they're usually in great shape. They're really fit. So, but the question is, were they fit before they became celebrities? Or do their jobs demand that they be fit? It's hard to tell. But there's definitely a reason why they all look pretty and they all have a certain physique. It's because that is what people are drawn to. People don't want to see ugly, out of shape people on the big screen. Now you can say that's because the modern culture or patriarchy or whatever. I would argue that is just biology, that we are drawn to certain physiques. We are attracted to certain faces. We are attracted to certain ratios. And that is what they want to put on the screen. They want to have attractive people living in nice neighborhoods, driving nice cars, living nice lives. If you watch any movie or TV show, they always live in high-end neighborhoods, and everybody looks better than your average person. Certainly better than your average person at Disney World or Walmart. The other source of this could be what we call diet culture. So what is diet culture? It's thoughts, beliefs, behaviors that put an unnecessary emphasis on weight loss and being thin. This is particularly pervasive among women, especially women in their 20s and 30s. But it can also go beyond that age, and it can also affect men too. But I would say it definitely affects, more than anybody, women between the ages of 14, 15, all the way into mid-30s, early 40s. I could be wrong about that. I don't have official data. But why would it affect women of that age more than any other age group? Like I said, women need physical beauty. Physical beauty is one of the greatest assets a woman has. I understand that women can do other things than to get married and have kids. I get that. But what is one of the innate advantages that they have? It is physical beauty. It is their sexuality. So when they're in their 20s and 30s and they're single, they need to attract a mate. And what's one way to do that? It's through their physical beauty. So there is pressure on women to have this certain physique. Not necessarily thin. I actually don't think thin is in anymore. I think fit is in. I think fit is in, but I don't think it's necessary to have this really thin body, this emaciated body. I don't know why that was ever the thing, because it looks really unhealthy, and I'm not sure how women give birth when they're that low. So diet culture is this unnecessary emphasis on weight loss. So stepping on the scale every day and eating really small portions of food and cutting out entire food groups and looking at your body a lot. A lot of body dysmorphia. So diet culture can lead to disordered eating habits, and it often does. I am not a big fan of dieting, or at least restrictive diets. But the thing is, everybody's on a diet. And for some people, a hypocaloric or a low-calorie diet is indicated. And I'll explain why in a future video. And I don't think being fat is necessarily a good thing. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. But we shouldn't just look at it and say being fat is okay. Anyway, the third source is fitness culture. So what is fitness culture? It's all the magazines, it's the blogs, it's the YouTube channels, it's gym culture. It's this kind of the subculture about being fit. And there is an emphasis on being fit in fitness culture. Duh, right? So people who go to the gym and people who work out with other people, they usually have some sort of weight loss goal. They usually have a fitness goal. They have a physique goal. They want to achieve some certain body. And that's okay. We are vain as humans. Okay, we want to be attractive to other people. We want to go to the beach and look good. We want to make a positive impression. It is almost impossible to have no vanity, to not care at all about your image, to not have any desire to look good in front of other people. It is impossible. If you don't care about how you look, if you don't care how other people perceive you, I think you're kind of weird. And it's okay to care how others perceive you. In some cases, that's a good thing because it makes you create new behaviors. You don't want other people to think that you're a total weirdo. I don't. Okay, you can be 10 or 20% weird, but you don't want to be 100% weird. You don't want to be a nudist Buddhist. Okay, that's too weird. You need that feedback from other people. We live in a society. We live and cooperate with other people. We don't live as complete hermits up in the woods. So you can tell yourself all you want, I don't care how others think about me. First of all, you're probably lying. Second of all, that's not smart. You need to integrate yourself properly into society. Now, the fourth source of fat phobia, I would argue, is biology. We have a natural preference for certain body sizes and certain physiques. And I think this is something that the body positive and the fat phobia activists are really missing here, is that we have a natural attraction towards a low waist to hip ratio. If you look at waist to hip ratios around the world, there is an ideal waist to hip ratio. It varies between people, but most healthy specimens have a waist to hip ratio of between 0.8 and 0.1. Now that might be different for men and females. In fact, it probably is, but there is a certain range that you want to aim for. They've done research and studies around the world across decades, and they show that people are attracted to certain waist to hip ratios, which tells me that there is a certain ingrained preference for certain body types. So fat phobia cannot be fully explained by Western culture or capitalism or marketing or fitness culture or diet culture. There is something about our brains that are attracted to a certain waist to hip ratio, and I suspect it is because certain waist to hip ratios are associated with improved fertility, health. So something tells me that the waist to hip ratio is an indicator of something really important, like health and the ability to bear children. So fat phobia cannot be just a social construct. There is a biological basis for it. Does that excuse the stigma that we ascribe to fat people? Does that mean we should shame them and tell them that they're fat and that they're lazy? Absolutely not. Not only that, there is research to show that some cancers like ovarian cancer and uterine cancer are positively associated with obesity. In fact, I think there was a study from University of Miami that showed that obesity is related to 8% of all cancers. So you take all of the people who die of cancer this year and multiply that by 0.08, that's a lot of deaths. Not only that, but a lot of comorbidities or a lot of medical problems are associated with high levels of body weight. If you take somebody's highest recorded body weight, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, sleep apnea, there are certain medical conditions that are associated with obesity. High levels of visceral fat, high waist sizes, these are not healthy. Having a lot of abdominal fat is never going to be healthy. And I think that's one reason why people don't want that. People don't want to be fat. People don't want to have a BMI of 38. People don't want to have a lot of visceral fat. Not only is it not attractive, not only is it not aesthetically pleasing, but it's also not healthy, and we have research to show that. Now, does that mean if you have a dad bod that you're going to be unhealthy and you're going to die in early death? Probably not. There is a little bit of leeway in the system. But to ignore the health hazards of having a large waist size and a lot of abdominal obesity is really foolish. But to ignore the health hazards of large waist sizes and large amounts of visceral fat is irresponsible. Not only that, but how do you explain the rise of obesity in the last 40 years. If you look at a graph in the United States of obesity rates, there is a sharp uptick after 1980. We cannot say that our genetics have changed. Our genetics have not changed at all. We cannot say health at every size, and we can't say that everybody has a different body type. Because the thing is, the average body type today is different from 40 or 50 years ago, and we have to start asking ourselves why. I suspect it's because we have access to cheap, convenient, tasty food 24/7. That's a problem. And because fitness and lean bodies are becoming more and more scarce, they're becoming more and more valuable as a result. So when you see somebody who's in great shape and they have a flat stomach, and let's say it's a woman with 15% body fat, which is pretty low for a woman, it's like, wow, that's remarkable. How did she do that? She's conveying signals. She's conveying a signal that she has self-discipline, that she has goals, that she can execute, that she knows what she wants, and she knows how to get it, and that she can control what she eats, and she can control her body size, which is pretty remarkable. Some people say you can't control your body size at all. That is absolutely not true. Obviously, there are limits to what you can achieve, but to tell a fat person, an overweight person, that they are doomed in that body and that they have no control over the body size is really a negative message. Not only that, but how do you explain the rise of obesity in the last 40 years? Did people just lose control of their body size? How is it that the average body today is much larger than it was 40 years ago? My point is, it can't all be genetics. Something is going on, and something has changed. So pop culture, diet culture, fitness culture, which places a lot of emphasis on being fit and being lean. But as I've just argued, there is biology, and that's the elephant in the room, and we cannot ignore it. But the elephant in the room is biology, and we can't ignore that. So maybe we put too much emphasis on having a lean, fit body. You can make the case for that. But we also can't ignore the health hazards of being obese, of being overweight, of having large amounts of visceral fat. That is irresponsible. So what about the discrimination against fat people? Should we call them sloppy? Should we call them lazy? I don't think so. And I'm going to tell you why. A lot of fat people struggle with their weight. A lot of fat people have done diets in the past. And that's the problem, is that they were fat, they had a problem, and there was pressure on them to lose the weight. Maybe their parents told them something. Maybe somebody at school made a joke about them. Maybe somebody fat shamed them. Maybe they had low self-esteem. So what did they do? They went on a really strict diet. They probably got results for a little while, but then they caved in. They fell off the wagon. I don't think they fell off the wagon. I think their brains rebelled. Then that led to binge eating, then night eating. They probably regained a bunch of weight, and now they're on this yo-yo cycle that they can't get out of. So I do empathize with fat people, because I've been there, losing it, gaining it, losing it, gaining it, feeling out of control, not being able to control what I put into my mouth, struggling with my weight. I totally get that. So I think we need to treat them with a combination of tough love. Like, yes, you need to lose weight. Yes, you need to make changes. Yes, you need to reduce the amount of food you're putting into your mouth, but also a little bit of empathy, because there is pressure on them to lose the weight. Many of them want to. Many of them have tried to, unsuccessfully. Anybody who has tried to lose weight or break any habit knows that it's not easy. This thing up here is really tricky, and it's really good at sabotaging you and your goals. So let's show a little bit of empathy, and let's also show some tough love, which I think the body positive movement is lacking. So let's talk about fat discrimination. I want to point out two examples. Let's talk about dating. If you put an overweight or a fat woman photo on a dating app, she's not going to get as many hits as a fit, lean woman. I guarantee you. With all things being equal, there might be some exceptions there, but a lean, fit woman is going to get more hits. Now, is that because we live in a fatphobic society? Maybe. Or is that because men are naturally drawn to a fit body? Men are attracted to women who look healthy, who can tolerate childbearing. People are attracted to other healthy specimens, and that's okay. That's natural. So I wouldn't say that's discrimination, and I wouldn't blame that on our modern society. I don't think we can blame that on fitness culture or pop culture or marketing. Remember, biology is a big component here, and we cannot alter biology. We can't ignore biology. Is biology cruel sometimes? Yeah, absolutely it is. But we have no say in the matter. That's how it is. That's how the game is played. The other example I want to provide is hiring practices. There are examples of companies not hiring a person simply because he or she was fat. And we know from surveys and from studies that fat people have a harder time gaining employment. And I think it's because subliminally we ascribe these characteristics to fat people, that they're fat, that they're lazy, that they can't do anything. Well, obviously that's not true. I've known some fat people in my life who were really cool, okay? And they probably struggled with their weight, and they probably wanted to lose it. They just didn't know how. Maybe they didn't have the support. Maybe they went on some stupid diet. Maybe they restricted too much. Maybe they had an eating disorder in the background that we just didn't know about. But your body size says nothing about you as a person, nothing about your character. It says nothing about your ability to complete a job. If I had to hire somebody, I would absolutely hire them even if he was fat. I would think nothing of that. Maybe because I think about this a lot more and I try to overcome these biases and I'm a little more conscious of it. But somebody's body size says nothing about their competence. So it is unfortunate that fat people have a harder time gaining employment, and there's no law in the book that says you can't hire somebody based on body size. I think there is one state, might be Minnesota or Michigan, that has technically passed a law against fat discrimination. I'm surprised more haven't, and I suspect more of those laws are coming. Now you can argue whether we should have them or not. I'm not here to debate that, but I'm just saying that fat people have a harder time getting dates and getting a job and being accepted. It is unfortunate, but remember, what's the elephant in the room? Biology. Another thing that the fat positive, or the other fact that the fat positive or the body positive movement misses, is that being obese is hard. If you're carrying an extra 50 or 100 pounds, your life is harder. It's harder to move, it's harder to run, it's harder to go upstairs, it's harder to play with the kids. You're carrying around all of this extra weight, and it doesn't make life easier. If you break a bone, if you have to go to rehab, your rehab is only going to be that much harder. Having said that, I think healthcare providers, including me, need to be a little more holistic. I was with a patient not too long ago, and she's heavy. Let's just say that. Probably 300 pounds, type 2 diabetic, and she's really weak. And she went to a doctor, and she was feeling ill. She had dizziness, and she had lost a lot of her strength, and she didn't know what was going on. And he said, "Oh, it's because you're fat and you're diabetic, so you just need to lose some weight." I think that's a really parsimonious answer, and I think as healthcare providers we need to be a little more holistic, and we need to think a little deeper than that. You can't look at a fat person and say that all of his or her health problems are due to his size. Yes, maybe some of them are. Yes, maybe losing 50 or 60 pounds would improve that person's metabolism or their overall health. Maybe it would solve a few of their problems. But we can't just say all of your health problems are because you're fat. Did we really go to medical school or physical therapy school just to tell patients to lose weight? We need to think a little harder sometimes. As it turns out, she had meningitis. Okay, talk about a faulty diagnosis. How do you go from lose weight to meningitis? So that doctor really blew it. Now, maybe he's seeing 30 patients a day and he was just looking for the easiest answer. I get it. Physicians are overworked. But to look at somebody who has a battery of symptoms and say, "Oh, you just need to lose weight and that'll solve all your problems," that's really lazy. In fact, that's lazier than sitting on a recliner and eating Cheetos all day. There are some overweight and fat people who are lazy. Okay, I get it. Of course, there were also some thin people who are lazy too. I was in a home and the grandson was there, and he was just a big Hispanic guy, probably 21, 22, and watching TV, eating a bag of chips. That is our perception of fat people, that they just sit around and they eat nothing but junk food and they're just lazy. I think that's unfair, because a lot of fat people are hard workers and they do great things and they're positive members of society and the community. And we can't write fat people off as lazy and sloppy. Sometimes that's true, many times it's not. So are fat people a marginalized group? Do we need laws to protect them? Do we need activists to support them? In some ways they are. They don't get the same treatment as fit people. But like I've said, a lot of that comes down to biology. When we see somebody who's fit and somebody who has a body that's scarce, and we see things that are hard to obtain, we place a greater value on that. So in a world where overweight and obesity are epidemic and nobody's in shape, when we see somebody who is in great shape, we value that because it's scarce and it's hard to do. In a world where we have tons of tasty, convenient food at our fingertips all the time, and then we see somebody who is in great shape, it's like, how did you do that? That's amazing. Okay, that's unfair, but it's also biology. We place more value on scarce things than on non-scarce things. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. That's why people value diamonds. That's why people value Ferraris. That's why men love bikini models. Okay, there's a reason for that. It's scarce. So I don't think fat people are a marginalized group. Remember, they have access to the same legal systems. They have the same protections. We can't deny them services. I don't know any case where a business denied a fat person service. I guess the airlines, some person couldn't fit into a seat and didn't want to pay for a second seat, so they get denied. Okay, so there are some rare exceptions to that. Although I think that comes down to economics, right? The planes need to make money and pay for all that jet fuel. So I don't think fat people are marginalized. I don't think they're treated properly all the time. But like I said, we need to show them a little bit of empathy, but also tough love. And I think that's what's missing from the body positive movement. It's like, yeah, they need some tough love. It's not okay to tell somebody who's obese that their body size is out of their control, that they'll never lose weight, that they're stuck in that body. Because the thing is, a lot of fat people want to be healthier and they want to lose weight. They just don't know how to do it. I'm confident if they had the right support, if they had the right diet, if they had the right counseling, if they had the right motivation to stay on track, I think they could make some changes in their body. Are they going to go from 300 pounds to a svelte 150 pounds with 8% body fat? Maybe not. But that's not the point. But telling a fat person that they can't make any changes, that their weight is purely genetic, that's not a positive message to be sending. But we also can't turn a blind eye and say that their weight isn't a problem. It is a problem. And their lives are going to be easier once they lose a little bit of that weight, even if it is 5 or 10%. It's going to help their joints. It's probably going to lower their blood pressure. They might get off a couple of medications. It's going to make a positive improvement in their well-being. And a lot of fat people know that. So remember, empathy plus tough love. We need both of them. So yes, fat people don't get equal treatment every day. I get that. They have a hard time getting a job. They have a hard time getting a date. People ascribe to them negative characteristics that they don't deserve. But remember, we cannot ignore biology. People are naturally attracted to certain physiques. And especially today, when fitness is scarce, people more than ever are attracted to people who have good bodies, who are fit, who are lean, who eat right. Why? Because it's hard and it's scarce. So what can we do every day to help fat people? First of all, don't be a douche. Don't call people names. Don't call fat people fatty or, wide ass or whatever. That doesn't help. Don't shame people. There was a video that Bill Maher made not too long ago, and he said we need to bring back fat shaming. I disagree. I don't think we need to bring back fat shaming. I think what we need to do, like I said, is tell them that yes, you need to make some changes. Yes, you are capable of doing that, but also show a little bit of empathy, because they've probably been struggling to make those changes. If you are hiring somebody, be aware of that bias. Be aware that you're probably biased against overweight and fat people. Consider the resume and just ask yourself the question, who is best fit to complete this job? Obviously, if you're a general manager of a sports team, you don't want to hire somebody who's overweight and out of shape, because you need people who are in great shape to play on your sports team. But if you're hiring somebody as an IT manager, who cares? Do you need to be in great shape to do that job? If you're hiring somebody for a job that doesn't have a large physical demand, then hire somebody who's going to do the job the best. That should always be the question. Not what's your race, what's your gender, what's your body size. Can you do the job? And can you do it effectively? That's what matters. If you're looking for a date, don't always, and I'm speaking to guys here, don't always go for the 9s and the 10s. Don't always look for a woman who's in this phenomenal shape and looks great in a two-piece bikini or whatever. Look beyond that. Be a little less superficial. I know your biology is hardwired, but having watched this video, you should be aware of those biases. On the other hand, you should look for somebody who does value health and who is in decent shape. But don't necessarily date a woman just because she has this great body. You need to consider some other things. And keep in mind too that some people who are overweight aren't necessarily unhealthy. And I wish they would get rid of it. But it is easy. And people who have a BMI of say 24, 25 aren't necessarily unhealthy. And if you have a fat friend, or if you know somebody who is fat or overweight in your circle, encourage them to make healthier changes. What you want to do is help them make positive behaviors. So whenever I see somebody who's overweight, obese, I see somebody who has struggled with food. They're not eating just a little more at each meal. They probably eat in secret. They probably eat at night. They're probably struggling with binge eating. They probably have a history of dieting. So let's steer them away from those behaviors and help them adopt healthier behaviors. Hope you found this video educational and entertaining. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to speak with me, there is a link below. And if you are fat and you are watching this video, have you ever experienced fat phobia in your life? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll like one of the other videos that you see on the screen. Click one of them, and I'll see you there.